And to you, good day.
Excellent. Wonderful to speak to you today.
And you as well. Thank you for the co-creation.
Excellent. My first question is, as far as the chrysalis and expansion of ascension throughout worlds, like how you had Shekinah expand your collective and integrate your collective.
Yes.
Does that reflection and does that pivot point, how does that take forms in multiple worlds? And how would that take form in our world that's maybe slightly different from your world?
Well, it has taken form in your world, and the way that it was different is that it has expanded over time through multiple teachers rather than simply one particular historical event. So the idea of Shekinah in our world can be expressed on your world as the idea we have discussed many times of what you archetypally refer to as either Christ consciousness or Buddha nature or Krishna spirit or many other ideas of master teachers in different cultures on your planet spread out over time, all delivering similar messages that have a cumulative effect, leading you to this point of transition now, where you bring that information with you and you make it work for you in an accelerated way. For us, it simply only needed to happen in one particular moment. For you, it stretched out over time.
Understood. So it's just time for us to get along with it.
Yes.
Excellent. My next question is going through this chrysalis time when people are experiencing such resistance and heaviness right now with maybe the shadow of physical reality during this time. What is, and you know, I like how you're talking about many of the biblical references during this time of forgiveness and the Lord's Prayer. Yes. And the idea of it's hard for quote unquote, I know this is a metaphor and not exact, but for a rich man to get into heaven is challenging, but that just denotes to fear-based systems and greed.
Yes, it's only talking about the idea of negative versions of attachment. It's not talking about whether you actually have physical wealth.
Yes.
It's talking about the accoutrements that often go with it that are fear-based.
Yes.
And so that's why we bring up the idea of the eye of the needle.
Yes. So during this time of this ascension process, it really seems to be, while people are going through a lot of financial hardship, it's about staying present with your energy and doing what you can do in your excitement, regardless of what happens. So it's the circumstances don't matter, is showing us more and more extreme ability and options to exercise this truth for us.
Yes, as long as you stay aligned with your integrity in terms of the actions that you take and strip away the idea of the fear-based beliefs, then you will streamline yourself to make it more feasible, more probable for you to go through the narrow passage of the eye of the needle and come out the other side in a more accelerated way and in a closer version to your true self.
Excellent. And through all the teachings of all the esoteric wisdoms of the mystery schools of all ages, all the practices from the very beginning, maybe from the teachings of the sages and the extraterrestrials, all have been leading us to awaken our dormant genetic material.
Yes.
Yes. So really it's the time to really be more convicted than ever than spiritual practice and internal cultivation and development and letting go of the external.
And in physical application. Yes. Remember that physical action is the language of physical reality. And if you're not actually taking actions that are representative of that spiritual awareness internally, then you're not speaking a language that anyone can hear.
Yes. Oftentimes I have a little bit of fear, maybe going back to past sessions where you talk about as the years go on and the energy accelerates, that you don't want to get left behind. So stay in that frequency. So I might have created, I want to be very careful of not jinxing myself or helping others unjinx themselves.
But watch the idea of the definition that you're holding on to, because the very thought that you can jinx yourself is part of what we're talking about that might be wise to let go of. And just assume that if you do your best, you'll be fine.
Got you. So don't second guess yourself. Stay in a state of conviction of knowing.
Yes, the idea of using the phrase being left behind is actually just another way of saying you're making your choices. You're making your decisions as to what you say you prefer to align with. That's all it means. So you will experience the consequences of your choices. That's all it means. So if you make choices that are more in alignment with who you really prefer to be, then it's not about framing it or phrasing it in the manner of being left behind. You will be in the reality that you chose to be in. And if it's the best you can do in terms of the choices you make, you'll be fine.
Excellent. I love that. And with the release of the Pentagon releasing UFO footage for the first time, has that brought your ship a little closer, perhaps?
Tiny bit.
Just a little bit?
Because it's just the beginning.
It's just the beginning. Because there's been an increase in UFO activity, has there not?
No, there has been an increase of your awareness of the activity that's going on all the time, and that's a big difference.
Excellent. And through all these changes,
yes,
as the stock market, like personally, I've been playing the stock market gains and losing, and I'm using this experience to neutralize and accept my decisions and not getting hard on myself.
All right.
Using this as a valid exploration of self-mastery to keep.
You can certainly do that, but again, please do remember not to ignore all other forms of abundance.
Yes, absolutely, which is the most important. And I see maybe that's a big issue with people that play the stock market is focusing too much on the financials when there's so much more beauty to it.
Because your stocks can rise with synchronicity. Your stocks can rise with being given gifts. Your stocks can rise with your imagination. Your stocks can rise in your ability to trade for what you need. Stocks can rise in all these forms and other forms of abundance. There is not only one stock market.
Wow, I love that. Going back to the idea of remembering your value and investing in yourself during this
Absolutely. And that comes with what? Appreciation.
Yes.
It's not an accident that you use these same terms for the idea of your financial reality. Appreciation, valuation, so on and so forth. These are things you need to give yourself so that your stocks will rise.
Excellent. Bashar, I had a powerful dream the other night of an anaconda.
Yes.
And it was very powerful because this anaconda was very calm and peaceful. And a bunch of little kittens were running around as well. And we all had a wonderful time enjoying each other's company. Can you speak a little bit more about the anaconda and the representation of the symbology in the dream?
The archetypal symbology has to do with connecting to ancient wisdom and the idea of unfolding some of the dormant DNA structures.
Wonderful. So
it is not an accident that your caduceus is two intertwined snakes, which is the idea of the genetic markers of DNA.
Yes, which is a symbol that I feel is really misunderstood this day and age, as it's a symbol of, on most hospitals, but a lot of people have forgotten and don't even know any clue about the ancient meanings and the history of where this comes from.
Yes.
Yeah, so maybe that's a big education for us to take place, to educate the lineage of where these things come from, of those great teachers, probably from, Tote himself. Is that right?
Yes.
Yeah.
And others as well.
So, and the idea that caduceus, as far as pinnacle health and evolution of DNA and genetic material, this is all coming back to the idea of the internal state of consciousness and vibration is the first thing to consider as far as health.
Yes. And it will open up more of the markers within your genetic makeup that will allow you to extend your senses into other dimensional realms, hence the kitten.
Wonderful.
Because cats can see into other dimensions.
So even the kitten has a representation. Maybe all the different animals have a representation of what can be had in the expansion of our senses.
And we just actually dealt with that particular question with another person.
Cool. So this goes back to the idea of the cryptic and merging with nature and connecting greater with nature.
It goes forward to that, yes.
Beautiful, beautiful. And the last question I have, as far as the world is going and finances, that
which world? The one you're in, or the one you're simply observing that is simply vibrationally incompatible with what you prefer, that you can see but are not part of? Which world?
I guess the world that I'm seeing that's slowly coming, that a lot of people might have negative belief systems about, as far as the IMF making a world currency.
But again, you navigate yourself with your actions in following the formula and following your passion. You navigate yourself through the parallel reality timelines that are representative more and more of the world you prefer. Remember, again, you don't change the world you're on. You change yourself and you shift to another version of Earth that coexists simultaneously with the one you used to be on. That one continues in its own way. And again, just because you might be able to observe portions of it, you're looking through a glass wall that separates that reality from the one that you are choosing to live in. So even though you can see it, it doesn't have the ability to get through the wall to affect you unless you choose to be affected and shift yourself and tunnel yourself through that wall to the other reality. So learn from what you're seeing as a way of contrasting what you do and don't prefer, and know that you are, through your actions and your vibrational choices, in the reality you prefer, regardless of what you see around you happening in other realities you don't live in.
Wonderful. Taking full ownership of your vibration and your conviction and confidence.
Because just because you can observe a reality you don't prefer doesn't mean you're part of it, if you remain neutral in your observation.
Excellent. So playing with the stock market, I have to be very careful that I don't fall into that collective traditional Wall Street energy.
It's not about being careful, because again, that implies that you might accidentally slip instead of just continue to make conscious choices about what you prefer.
Excellent, Bashar.
Watch your definitions.
Thank you so much. That helps me extremely much, and I'm always extremely grateful to interact with you and love you very much. Thank you.
Then we extremely and unconditionally love you as well.
Excellent.
Thank you.
Thank you.
We have some questions from our streaming viewers.
All right, please proceed.
Okay, regarding the parallel reality wheel, do we think of it as a large wheel we spin for prizes like on a game show, or more like a steering wheel we can control?
You can think of it either way. As we explained, you can use your imagination to alter it however you wish, as long as you get the opportunity to explore, as in the guided meditation, the idea of a particular parallel reality that will allow you to stretch your senses, so to apply that stretching to your present timeline. So you may do it however you wish.
Okay. And when you see so many realities at the same time, how do you know which one you are actually in?
We know only, and this is all we need to know, that we are always navigating through the ones that are in alignment with the state of being we have chosen to be in. Therefore, we automatically navigate through all the ones that are appropriate for us, creating an overall timeline that is appropriate for us. So we don't have to specifically know exactly which timeline we are in at any given moment, because we know it's the right one for us.
And for us, how do we know which one we're actually in, since we can see so many?
Again, if you follow the formula that we have given you, you are automatically navigating through the ones that are in alignment with the state of passion, with your true self, as you choose to be in that particular state of vibrational frequency. You don't have to intellectually know which one you're in. You don't know that right now. Remember, you are creating what appears to be your timeline, building it up out of many different parallel realities already. It's not that you have to specifically know at any given moment which one you're in, because you're shifting billions of times per second. All you have to know is that the combination of parallel realities you're shifting through is creating a sense of continuity in an overall timeline experience that is aligned with the state of being that you choose to be in. You can't have it otherwise, because again, remember, the physics is you can't experience something that is not reflective of the state of being you're in. So in that sense, you are always in the parallel reality, positively or negatively, that is aligned with the state of being you're in. So that's why it's so crucial to follow the formula and always be acting on your passion, because then you know that if you are precisely following the formula, you're only going to navigate through those parallel realities that are the ones that are conducive to continuing to expand you in positive, creative, loving way.
Okay, and what evidence will we have that we are living in a higher dimension? And how do you know if you've already shifted to a higher dimension?
More and more synchronicity that serves you in a positive way, more and more flexibility and malleability in the idea of time and space, so that things can happen in an amount of time that might some way seem almost impossible that it could have happened that way. You will experience less of the idea of time. You'll be living more in the present in a variety of ways. And over time, you will see fewer and fewer and fewer representations over the years of realities that are simply not vibrationally compatible with you. Depends on the rate at which you yourself allow yourself to remain in the positive state that determines how quickly or slowly you may move through this process. But nevertheless, you will see more symptoms. Also, your senses will expand so that you can begin to perceive things that were heretofore invisible to you. Other dimensional beings, the idea that people are seeing energy, lights, UFOs, other kinds of information being received by you, downloaded into you in a more perceivable way, that you're more consciously aware of receiving this kind of information, that you're becoming more lucid in physical reality and seeing it as a projection of consciousness, experiencing it more that way, so that from time to time, physical reality seems a little less solid, a little less real. These are many of the symptoms, not all, but many of the symptoms of accelerating into the fourth density, higher physical reality vibration.
Thank you. If there's parallel realities, each one having a slightly different version of me, then how do I know choosing a parallel reality can make a difference, since I'm in all of them?
You are not in all of them. The idea is that each of those versions is its own distinct person. But the idea is that what you experience through continuity as a change in yourself is not a change in your personality. It is a shift of your consciousness to express itself through a completely different personality, a completely different person. So any change, as we have said, is a total change. And since you are shifting billions of times per second, you are literally shifting your consciousness through billions of people per second, billions of versions of you. But versions of you are not you in the sense of the personality. It's only you in the sense of your consciousness, your overall consciousness that perceives itself to be itself. But any change in what you consider your personality to be is actually your consciousness now perceiving through a different person entirely.
And so that also applies to the idea of being an infinite being that always exists, because everything is always perceived as happening, in a sense, to you.
Correct.
Regardless of what environment, what reality you're experiencing.
Correct.
It's a very interesting phenomenon.
Yes. But that's how it works in terms of the different levels working together. When someone uses the word I, me, you, things like that, they have to understand what level they're actually referring to. If you're referring to the personality level, well, that's constantly changing because it's a projection of consciousness. It's an artificial construct anyway. In a sense, you are channeling through different people in different realities. Different versions, so to speak, are different people, and you're constantly shifting through them. But when you talk about yourself perhaps as the idea of an oversoul, then you can constantly say, yes, I am having all these different experiences, all these different incarnations simultaneously. But the individual soul, the individual higher mind, the individual physical mind and personality can only refer to itself, and it is not anyone else. It is simply who it is as an individual expression or reflection of the higher levels of the greater being that you are.
So if your personality construct is constantly changing, but it always continues to exist, is that correct?
Yes, because other aspects of the greater being are expressing themselves through it simultaneously. It's not a matter of the idea of leaving it empty. It's a matter of the idea of understanding that what, quote unquote, your greater being experienced a moment ago as coming through one personality is still being experienced by that aspect of your greater being. But now the greater being has also allowed itself to experience another personality perspective, and that's going on simultaneously too. It's simply shifting, in a sense, its attention in a certain way to allow that personality to think it's the only one having that experience. I know this can be a little bit confusing to the idea of third and fourth density physical reality perceptions, but nevertheless, it's simply a matter of understanding that everything is going on simultaneously. Nothing ever actually stops being experienced. It's just that holographically, simultaneously, the greater being can experience, or the personality can be experienced by the greater being as being the only thing that is being experienced at that moment. But that perspective is only coming from the physical personality. That perspective is not coming from the greater being, the oversoul, or something higher up. That's experiencing things simultaneously.
And so since all aspects continue to exist and they exist simultaneously, then technically you can connect with any version of your personality that has ever existed during your timeline by reaching out?
Well, yes, you can. And that's why we say now it's very important for you to start being informed by your so-called future self rather than your past self in order to be pulled, in a sense, toward more of that particular aspect or expression of the greater being that is expressing itself as that individuated personality that will serve you in more positive ways.
And so often as a healing technique, people use this idea of going back and visiting a past version of themselves that may have suffered some sort of trauma.
Yes.
Is that the idea of actually you're shifting timelines to another version of you that, I mean, what's happening there?
Well, you're shifting to a version of yourself that is using another version for that purpose. In other words, constantly you are creating a third version, a third personality, a simulacrum. If you are aware of yourself in the present and aware of the idea of the version of you in the past, then there has to be a third personality that contains both of those ideas if you're using it that way.
And then those become unique scenarios unto themselves. Yes.
They do.
It's very fascinating.
It's very multidimensional. It's really important in this context for this conversation to understand exactly how holographic and multidimensional all of you actually are.
It's becoming more clear.
Which could be one of the symptoms of accelerating into fourth density, in that these concepts become more clear.
And it's not so overwhelming to think about the idea of all of these different versions of the self, and the idea that you can, in a sense, time travel and communicate with these different versions and help them accelerate in their experience.
Yes. But again, the idea is that you don't necessarily have to pay attention to them individually in that way. That's why, again, we say that if you're simply following the formula, the ability to navigate and deal with these things in the way that actually serves the individual you are being at that moment is built in automatically to following the formula. It's not like you have to pay attention to all the details. A holistic point of view or a holistic experience, by acting on your passion and following the formula, will contain whatever aspects of this whole experience you actually need to intellectually wrap your mind around. But that doesn't mean you have to be aware of every single detail to know that it's working just fine to your advantage, to your benefit.
And then refocusing on the future self is what allows you to have a much more unlimited perspective of what you can become, what you can do now, what's possible.
Yes, in a sense. You still remain in the present, but you can be informed by the idea you call your future self, which most people positively will assume is in a higher state. Now, there might be some people that assume that a future self is in a lower state, but obviously that's not the choice we are encouraging you to make. The idea is that in the idealized definition of a future self, it is that version that has a more comprehensive understanding and more of an experience of utilizing the formula in a way that benefits you, so that it becomes more aware that it has the capacity to encourage you toward itself almost magnetically. So if you key into that magnetic attraction to the idea of a higher vibrational future self, you will allow yourself to gravitate through the timelines in that direction.
That's very helpful. Thank you.
Yes.
Now, some questions that came up about last week and what's currently happening. Some of the states are now opening up and loosening restrictions. Can you share with us how this is going to work out and what we can expect as a result of this?
Well, metaphorically, you are literally experimenting with different, quote unquote, states of being, so that you can see what the choices every state is making or every city is making will do with respect to the situation that you're all going through. So you're experimenting, you're opening up to experiment and see what works for you, so that again, you're giving yourself a multitude of choices. And by certain states and certain cities and certain countries deciding how they wish to go through this experience, you are given a sparkling opportunity to see in your own discernment what does and doesn't work for you.